Laney's Life, Chapter 1, Made by Me. Laney lived in a small house right off the highway. It was the morning of December 10th, and it was snowing very hard, and it felt like any other day. She walks into school, gets to math class, which is her first period, and finishes up the rest of the day. At least that's what Laney thought. Mrs. Garson, her math teacher, understood her the most than almost anyone else. Laney always grew up loving her teachers, but there was something special about Mrs. Garson. She loved Mrs. Garson with all her heart, and so did she. They had a special bond nobody could break between them. Once Laney starts getting older, she starts getting more curious about her surroundings, so she decides to sneak out at night and go look at the woods in her backyard. She creepily walks into the woods, knowing she's going to regret this, but doesn't want to go back to her house where there's constant screaming, yelling, anything you can think of between her parents. She takes one step in the woods and gets a creepy feeling about this. It's dark, humid, and just doesn't feel right. She shivers and stumbles across a water fountain that has growing algae on the fountain, but not in the water. The water looks cleaner than the water in her house. She doesn't want to be out in the freezing cold much longer, so she starts walking back home. Next thing she knows, she hears a faint noise sounding like it's coming towards her, but is fading and going the opposite direction. Once it gets closer, something is telling her to run away, but it feels like her feet are stuck where they are. She eventually gets the courage and freedom and runs away. She's looking behind her the whole time, not paying attention to what she may run into or any of the surroundings in front of her. She keeps running, looking behind her at full speed, and darts into a metal pole, blacks out, and loses consciousness. Next thing she knows, she wakes up in a hospital. The question, how did someone find her so fast, ran through her head like a marathon. She's in wires, in a hospital gown, and is linked up to a heart machine. She's awake now, she thought as she clicks the call button and doesn't get a response for a bit, eventually sees about a dozen doctors run into the room and start clapping. Laney is then questioning herself. All the doctors leave, running to the lobby to get her parents is what Laney is seeing. Her parents run into the room faster than she's ever seen them run. They hug her very tightly but gentle at the same time. "Mom, Dad, why am I here?" asked Laney continuously. "Why did you sneak out?" said Mom furiously. At that moment, Laney felt like she couldn't speak or didn't even know how to talk. I, Laney said, stuttering. Doctors came rushing in, telling Laney everything she needed to know. "You may have surgery tomorrow," said many doctors. She had surgery later that morning, and then her parents had to leave to go to work. Laney stared out at the window of her hospital room 4-3, the pale morning light spilling over the city that felt so distant yet so close. She could hear the faint sounds of traffic, the life outside that seemed to carry on without her. The sterile scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, reminding her of the days she had spent confined within the dull white haven, filled with the constant hum of machinery and the soft shuttle of nurses' feet. At just 12, almost 13, Laney felt as though she'd missed so much. The last time she had a normal day like everyone else, she could barely remember. What she did remember, though, was the yelling, the screaming. Her parents had been at each other's throats for what felt like years, and despite her attempts to plead them with stop, the fighting only grew stronger. She wished they could see the damage it was doing not only to her, their relationship, but to her. "Laney," the soft voice of her mom interrupted her thoughts. How is she already off work? That was the unanswered question that ran through Laney's head at that moment. It was high-pitched and cautious, like she was walking on eggshells. As her mother stepped into the room, Laney turned away, staring out at the world again. "Hi, Mom," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're being discharged today, aren't you excited?" There was a flicker of hope in her mother's tone, but Laney felt only a sense of dread welling up inside her. "No," Laney replied. The world felt heavy on her tongue. "Why not?" Her mother took a hesitant step closer, concerned about pinching her features. "Because I don't want to go home." The confession hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Laney could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. "But we've worked so hard to get you well. You can't stay here forever," her mom urged, her voice trembling slightly. "I'd rather go anywhere than home," Laney shot back, the frustration bubbling to the surface. "I didn't even want to come here in the first place. You think the hospital was fun?" Her mother sighed heavily, running a hand through her hair. "I know things haven't been easy, but your father—" "Don't," Laney interrupted, her heart racing. "I don't want to hear about Dad. He's the one who fights with you all the time. I need to get away." She turned once more to the window, the bustling sounds of streets calling out to her like a siren song. The kids she could see on the sidewalk were laughing, running, living freely from the heavy chains that bound her to her home. Without another word, Laney stole a glance at her mother, who was now biting her lip, clearly torn between her daughter's safety and her own heartache. Laney seized the opportunity and made her decision. "I'll run away," Laney declared, the words spilling from her lips. "I'll go to the park or the library or just anywhere that isn't home." Her mother's widened with alarm. "Laney, you can't do that. You just got out of the hospital. You need to take it easy." But Laney was done listening. She could hear her parents fighting again, their raised voices floating through her mind like an unwelcome echo. She imagined running out into the open air, the wind brushing against her skin, the freedom of not having to hear the chaos at home. Before her mom could respond, Laney grabbed her backpack, which still held her belongings from before her hospitalization. She dashed toward the door, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm leaving," she started back, her heart pounding. "Laney, wait," her mother called after her, but she didn't stop. She pushed through the door, her sneakers hitting the cool tire of the corridor. Every step felt like a clash of emotion within her: fear, anger, excitement, and a strange sense of liberation. As she burst out into the sunlight outside the hospital, Laney took a deep breath, inhaling the world that stretched out before her. The noise of the city filled her ears, and for a moment she forgot about the chaos at home. Her heart raced as she made her way to the park, memories of laughter and play flooding her thoughts. But deep down, she knew she couldn't run forever. Running away wouldn't erase the reality of her life, but it felt like a desperate attempt to remind herself that she had a choice, that she could find her own way, even if it meant being lost for a little while. As she plopped down onto a swing in the park, letting herself sway back and forth, Laney realized she needed to face her fears. Maybe she could talk to someone about the fighting, maybe even talking to her parents when they calmed down. With each push forward, she felt a little stronger. Today was a small rebellion, an act of courage. But it had also led her to find a small sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could help create the peace she so desperately wanted, starting with herself.